I'm a sculptor. My name is David Hostetler. I'm having a rather unique experience here at the Marshall Fredericks Museum, in that tonight is a preview of my first major documentary, and it includes a lot of the pieces that are in this exhibit. The title of the film is The Last Dance, and that's the major piece in this exhibit. And it's the one at the moment I'm extremely excited about because it's my last baby. And it's got a lot of images in it that I'm not sure that I understand yet because I've just done it. And it usually takes me a while to understand what I've just done, because for artists, the subconscious is the food, and it doesn't reach the conscious level for sometimes a year. And time will tell, and I'll understand it a year from now, and I'll tell you about it. One of my hallmarks is the fact that I only do women, and that's always a mystery to some people, but not to most men. There's a lot of reasons that I do women. It started out very personal, the women in my life, and as I grew older, I started looking at antique women, pre-Christian, pagan societies, and Ashura is the largest piece in this show. And she was originally from Phoenicia, went to Canaan land. Is a very, very strong, strong woman. Grew from the roots of a tree. When I read about her in the book of Moses, I went, this is a woman for me. So she evolves from a tree into this incredible, powerful woman. And women, for me, are the power. And there's so many reasons that I can't elucidate them all here, but I just know that's been my fixation and will probably remain so the rest of my life. When I found Ashura, as I say, one of the strongest women, I really was enamored with the fact that she was a tree goddess, and there are no tree gods, for obvious reasons. Women are the regenerative power, and that's the force of the image, the symbolism of the tree goddess. So you'll see that these women, which represent many cultures, I've got African, Egyptian, they're all there because every culture had a tree goddess. So at this point, I love the fact that they grow from their roots out of the ground, regenerate, and that's the whole idea of women, the regeneration. They be the power. My midlife, which would be in the 50s, when I was in my 40s, I went to New York and was introduced to haute couture. I met models, Harper's Bazaar, and I went from folk women, rather, peasanty types from the Midwest, from where I'm from, and got very enamored with style. So you'll see a number of my pieces that are extremely stylistic, very model-oriented, and that was a given period in my life. And I think any artist goes through multiple periods if they grow. If they get fixated and stop someplace, I look at that as too bad. I'm still growing, still having fun, still looking. The duo is extremely important in my life, not for just the reason that Donald Trump has it in Columbus Circle, which is important enough, but it grew out of the fact that I'm with a wonderful woman who immediately wanted to be married, and I was scared to death because the consequences of marriage, partnership in general, which is what the subject matter of the piece is, one has to give up a lot of themselves to make the gestalt of two, which is greater than the parts. So this piece represents that, which is an icon. It's a stereotype. It's something that relates to everyone in our society because it's about all of us. So that's one of my major pieces. The painting sculptures on the wall are a new direction for me, but not really, because when I went into art in the 1940s, nobody that went to art school in the 1940s was a sculptor. You went in primarily as a graphic artist, life drawing, and worked your way up to oil painting, no case scenes yet. And so when I moved to sculpture, it eclipsed all my painting. And now in my later life, I'm putting together the painting and the sculpture as one form. And I'm not sure where this is going to go yet, but I eventually think that the sculpture will morph out of that three-dimensional surface and birth itself in a four-dimensional form. And that's what these paintings are about, is merging sculpture and painting, which I don't see anybody doing much of. The birth of this concept came through my wife, who runs the gallery on Nantucket, had a client who saw a painting with a sculpture in front of it, and she said these two cannot be separated. They really are together. And she bought them both. And I looked at her imagery on this, what she was seeing, and decided I would start creating a sculpture and painting as a real related pairing. And out of that grew this sculpture painting concept that I'm playing with now, and some of them are quite large. Some of them are 11 feet tall with a 10-foot sculpture coming out. I'm very process-oriented, which isn't the nature of contemporary art, primarily at this point. People are very conceptual. I still love the craft, the feel, actually in the making, the touching of the wood, and the actual act of carving. So leaving the mark of the carver, which is the mark of the process, is something you'll see on most of my pieces. What I'm doing now, like in The Last Dance, is trying to interrupt the rhythm of that carving. Up until now, I've tried to do a tap, 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 tap that sort of had a heartbeat to it that gave you a sense of security. Now I'm trying to interrupt that. I want it so that you can't figure out the rhythm. You'll see large stroke, small stroke, flat stroke, rough stroke. So it's a music that's quite different. And it relates to my jazz, because I'm getting much freer, more creative in the jazz act than I was in midlife. So as I'm moving into my 80th year here, I'm getting looser, and I'm feeling good about it. I just wonder, what the hell are we doing at 90? Now, one of the things the viewer really probably isn't aware of when they walk through the exhibit is that I'm part of a dying age. I'm part of the old dinosaur group, like Marshall Frederick, who conceived objects piece by piece, not just the concept, but the actual doing of that object. And in today's word, the concept, the TV, video, dance are all fused into art in a way to make an amalgamation that didn't exist when I started. So I'm still sort of fixed. My attempt to bring the painting and the sculpture together in my sculpture paintings attempts to fuse. Now, a lot of contemporary artists attempt to fuse dance, film, poetry, video, which is good. But I'm still part of that old age that came out of the 1930s and 1940s. Now, I've been very lucky in my life in many respects, but one of them is at 80, I've still got the use of my hands. But when I turned 70, I started thinking that perhaps you should have another media that you might be able to do sitting down, wheelchair, whatever, because who knows, who knows. So I started doing prints in the early 90s, And the prints now sometimes are drawings for sculptures. Sometimes they become the subject from the sculpture, but they're immediately tied into the same subject matter. And it's something that's much more prolific than sculpture. I mean, it's much less physicality. And I hope when I'm 90, I'll be making prints and sculpture together. Exhibitions are just a fragment, a view of an artist's life. It's just a portion. You can't show everything. You can't show 60 years of my creative activity. So it becomes, because of the curators, in this case Marilyn Wheaton and my wife Susan, chose a view, an image, a peek into a fracture of what I do, so it's as much their art as my art, because the exhibit becomes their choice of what they think I represent. Now, I'm not sure psychologically what drove them to choose the pieces they did. The Last Dance is obvious. It's the last piece I've done. It's a feature of the film, so it is thus far the end. The others are leading up to it, and each one of them has contributed something toward that piece. And at this point, I'm not quite sure, and I leave it to you, the viewer, to figure out, because you bring as much to it as I do, because each of us are unique, and the art doesn't exist without the viewer. One of the questions often asked of an artist, what's your favorite piece? And I love the quote, like Pablo Picasso said, depends on what day it is. And Giacometti is really my favorite answer, and that's the next one, because you're never totally satisfied. You're bringing together all the forces in your life to come to bear on that magic moment for that piece. But as you're finishing it, you're already thinking of the next one. So my favorite piece, really, I think, like Giacometti, is the one that's still to come.